We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other thing, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Oh, beautiful, our heroes proved in liberating strife. Who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than life. America.
You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
Most writers and radio show hosts know that to connect with your fans, you need to do more than just write books or record the latest podcasts. There are many different elements that go into forming an online platform, but there are also many hidden traps. To make matters worse, solid advice on how to survive the muddy waters is scarce. In the book Hidden Traps, I talk about some of the important issues of working with an online platform, highlighting traps that could put your physical or internet security at risk or be harmful to your reputation. Are your social media posts just links with a few disjointed words, making you look like someone who can't complete a sentence? Did your new website cost you more than you anticipated? Are you leaking your personal contact details across the web without even knowing it? Then you need Hidden Traps. Hidden Traps is now available in paperback and ebook from a variety of retailers, including Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Kobo. Visit blackwolfpublications.com for more details.
Do you need a car? Been shopping only to be turned down because of bad credit, low credit, no credit, bankruptcy, or divorce? Guess what? Today's your lucky day, because now you can buy a car, truck, or SUV, just about any vehicle. It's true. Bad credit doesn't matter. No credit doesn't matter. Bankruptcy or divorce, it just doesn't matter. As a matter of fact, your job is your ticket to your new vehicle. We're Auto Credit Express, and we've helped thousands of people just like you. Antonio H. told us, great company, got me connected, and the day I went in, I drove off in the car I wanted. 100% worth your time. Need a car? Get started now and drive off as early as today. Just text FINANCE, FINANCE, to 357-911 right now to get started. That's FINANCE, FINANCE, to 357-911. Auto financing the easy way. Text FINANCE to 357-911.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
Everyone loves liberty. Our rights come from God, not the government. So why are you letting other people tell you what's best for your healthcare? Exercise your freedom with Liberty Health Share. Liberty Health Share is a community of people who voluntarily share one another's medical costs. Liberty Health Share is founded on the idea that most people truly want to help one another. Healthcare sharing allows members to do just that as a true community that supports one another in times of need. Liberty believes people should make decisions for themselves and their families. Members are able to take back the freedom to make their own decisions about their healthcare. Freedom from guilt or doubt about how your money is used. You have the freedom to direct your healthcare, not to be dictated to by bureaucrats. Stop letting others tell you what to do and join a community of like-minded people. Exercise your freedom. Join Liberty Health Share and take back the control of your healthcare while helping those around you. Call Liberty at 855-58-LIBERTY. Again, that's 855-58-LIBERTY for more information, or you can check them out at libertyhealthshare.org. Again, that's libertyhealthshare.org.
My son was in the Army back during Desert Storm, but even then he wanted an MBA. He looked at a dozen schools, but only one offered the online education and flexibility he needed while he was in a tent in Iraq. Grantham University. Turns out that Grantham's been delivering affordable, relevant college and advanced degrees for over 65 years. Heck, if they can deliver a quality education to a soldier in a tent overseas, think about the flexibility Grantham can offer you so you can earn your degree too. It doesn't matter how complicated or full your life is. If getting a degree is on your bucket list, you'll want to do what my son did. You'll want to call Grantham. Find out how easy it is to get started on your education so you can check that college degree off your bucket list. Call Grantham right now. 800-910-1370. That's 800-910-1370. Flexible, affordable, relevant. Call 800-910-1370.
At St. Jude, a family never sees a bill at all. It's like the world has been lifted off of your shoulders.
St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
Sometimes writers feel lost, unsure why a passage may not be working. It takes another set of eyes to help us nurture our writing into full maturity. At Black Wolf Editorial Services, we strive to enable writers to develop and grow, offering manuscript critiques and line edits through a mentoring editorial style. We also offer assistance on generating a writer's bio for your websites. Black Wolf Editorial Services, nurturing your writing into maturity. For a full list of services, visit blackwolfeditorial.com.
You're listening to the Spark Radio Network, internet radio like you've never heard before. Innovation, creativity, and imagination are all said to begin with a spark. So fasten your seatbelt and take the ride of your life and listen for the spark.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other thing, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Oh, beautiful, our heroes proved in liberating strife. Who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than life.
The hand is there, the puck is still loose, 11 seconds, you've got 10 seconds, the countdown going on right now, Morrow, up to Schultz, 5 seconds left in the game, do you believe in miracles? Yes! Unbelievable!
Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to For Immediate Release. I'm Liz Feld, and I'm joined again by my close friend and co-host Billy O'Reilly. We are in separate places, but we're on the line together here, and we've got a very special guest tonight who'll be joining us in about 10 minutes, Ken Kurson. But welcome back, everyone. We were off last Monday for Labor Day, and we hope that you enjoyed a nice long holiday weekend. And Billy, it's good to talk to you.
Hey, Liz, how are you? How's it going?
You've been campaigning nonstop. Not for yourself, for everybody else. You're living. When you have to ask me what's new, we know it's a problem.
I'm in the bubble. I'm doing the governor's race in New York, and I have no idea what's going on in the rest of the world. I mean, a little bit, but it's you get in that bubble and you live in the bubble, and I'll be out of it on November 8th or whatever the day is.
Well, it hardly seems like there was much of a summer. There has not been a slowdown in news, either at the national level, the international level, locally, certainly not with sports. Football started this weekend, so that's good. And I'm actually watching our New York Jets crush the Detroit Lions right now.
There hasn't been a slowdown in the political news for like 6 years. Doesn't it feel like that?
Yeah.
It's incredible. I don't know, these reporters are ready to drop, I think. Some people wish they would, but I work with them, so I wish them well. But it's, boy, I mean, it just day after day after day, minute after minute.
Well, and you'd think that it's just the 24-hour, cable news reporters who would be on that pace or having to keep up like that. But, there isn't a print reporter. There's no distinction anymore between the print and television that isn't following, exactly the same way. It's their deadlines are every 10 minutes. It's not every 24 hours or 12 hours or 3 hours.
Do you remember that when they'd say, get back to me, and that meant you can get back by 6 o'clock was deadline. It's like, when do you need it? Deadline 6. And now it's if you get back 7 minutes later, you're too late for the first draft of the story. We'll update. Amazing.
Yeah. Well, and there's a huge downside to that, obviously. But I guess when you're looking at very bad news, there's a good upside, because it doesn't seem to me that there's anything that's got any traction anymore right now when it comes to quote unquote breaking news.
Well, you can't talk about anything too long, and I think that's one thing is that people in politics, the elected officials, know they can get away with anything because they can endure any news cycle. I think Bill Clinton proved that with Monica Lewinsky. Eventually, the news will move on, and if you just resist it, you can survive. But it's the stuff just pops up. It's the shiny objects. It's funny. You just reminded me on the way. I was going to ask you later on the launch music of the Apollo landing. I mean, what do you think about them not doing the flag? Did you see that story, Liz? You sent it to me.
I did send it to you.
Me, I think.
I did send it to you, and I actually thought it was a mistake. I actually thought it was a mistake when I first read it, and then I almost first of all I was disgusted, and then I laughed, and I thought it's not even political correctness. I don't know what it is. The fact that for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, there's a new movie coming out with Neil Armstrong and the first moon landing, with the Americans planting the flag, and that particular clip where the flag is actually planted has been deliberately omitted from the film. Bradley Cooper is the star. He plays Neil Armstrong. And because they think that this was actually an international moment, which it was certainly celebrated world. But as Marco Rubio pointed out, American money, American ingenuity, American technology, and American initiative. And we're actually
an American president calling it,
Yeah,
right.
We're actually hiding it. Let's do everything but show the American flag. It's just nuts. It's just nuts.
You know what kills me is I'd love to see that movie, but I can't see it now. I refuse to watch it if they're going to omit the American flag from that. I wonder if somebody like spaced, like they just forgot to do the flag scene, and now they're trying to rationalize it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because what are you kidding me?
I actually thought, what would be better than sitting in a Hollywood movie script meeting and hearing, fly on the wall and hearing the back and forth about it. Well, we could, but we don't have to. I just the whole thing, like people
get some crazy liberal. This is really an international thing.
Carried it all the way up there, but it just no. It's really it's just nuts. I'm surprised Trump hasn't waited on that actually, or maybe he has and I just missed it.
It was probably the same 28-year-old who wants to prosecute the U.S. for war crimes in Dresden or something. It's it just come on, get real.
Yeah, but I'm sure the movie's gonna kill it now. They'll probably make more money than anything else, given what the mood of the country is. It's tough. It's tough. Later on,
it's tough.
We're going to talk about what's going on with Nike and their spectacularly popular campaign supporting athletes, which obviously stemmed initially from Colin Kaepernick's protest of the national anthem, or during the national anthem. It wasn't of the national anthem during the football games, and what it's led to. But I don't know how you feel about that.
I've reached Ken Kerson. Please leave me a message. Thank you.
Well, that didn't work.
At the tone, please record your message. When you've finished recording, you may hang up or press 1 for more options.
Hey, Ken, it's Bill O'Reilly and Liz Fell. We're just calling to wish you a happy new year. We're on the show now. If you got a chance, give us a shout. The audience would love to hear from you because you're brilliant and you know a lot.
He's answering. I think he was expecting the call to come from me.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
So what do you think about the Nike stuff?
Oh, I was going to say we should probably introduce Ken before he calls back in. The Nike thing though. I actually think it might be a brilliant move, and the reason is that I think Nike's thinking a couple of steps ahead. That the athletes, and particularly the black athletes, African American athletes, will, Nike's hot again. I mean, you got to stay cutting edge. They will wear Nikes again, and what do the kids wear? But what the athletes wear. And so, I had my sister work for a bunch of years studying for a book. Trends in African American communities, because the kids in the suburbs, the white kids in the suburbs, would pick it up about 18 months later. So it's like that's, I mean, the trend starts someplace, and with athletes, it starts in the field. Not that all athletes are black, but a lot of great athletes are. And I think black and white athletes will be wearing Nikes because Nike came out and did what it did. And in the end, I think it's a smart move. Short term, it may hurt, but long term.
Great. Sorry about that. That was just Ken trying to dial in. We're having another one of these little issues. Hold on one sec. Okay. Hey, Rick.
Yeah, I'm here.
Do you need his number again? So he's been trying to dial you too.
No, I have it. It's just this account won't actually dial in. Just tell him to hang up and I'll call right back.
Okay.
That's great. Just so you guys, everybody knows, is Ken Kirson's going to be joining us. Ken is a absolutely fascinating guy. He besides being the former editor-in-chief of the New York Observer, which was Jared Kushner's newspaper.
Hello.
Oh, here's Ken. He can talk for himself. Hey, Ken.
Hey, Ken. Welcome. Sorry about that. How are you?
I'm great, guys.
Happy New Year to you.
Like old times.
All of our
Happy New Year. It's like old times.
Celebrating the holiday
Thank
tonight.
you. Happy New Year to you both and all your listeners.
Billy was just giving you an
thanks.
illustrious introduction, so I'll let him continue.
I was just boasting about all the things you've done. You've done so many interesting things. And I'm trying to think what the best way to introduce you to our guests. One thing we thought about, Ken, because it's germane, tomorrow in particular, is with the 9/11 holiday, not to talk about 9/11, too much. But you are the co-author with Rudy Giuliani of Leadership, which I believe was published in 2002. Is that right, Ken? And
it was it was very late 2002, the fall.
2002. And I was wondering, it might be really interesting. Could you talk a little bit about what it was like working with the mayor in preparing the book? I mean, those are some pretty heady times, and it was captured beautifully. You and the mayor certainly, captured it because you lived it.
Well, I really appreciate that question. And I was just actually thinking tonight, we had family dinner for the holiday, and I was thinking how, it Monday, September 10th, 2001. Now, we're back on a Monday, September 10th, and going into Tuesday, September 11th. And September 10th, 2001 was really the last day anyone anywhere near New York and to some degree Washington ever went to sleep without sort of understanding what the world was going to be like. So I had been working with Mayor Giuliani for about 8 or 9 months at that point on a book that was at that time supposed to be the sort of, cute little management book. It was going to be called Rudy's Rules, and it was about, how you take an out-of-control city and, fix crime, fix the budget, all the stuff he had done. He had a great time as mayor for 7+ years at that point, but he wasn't that well known to the rest of the country and certainly the world. And then all of a sudden, in a span of 15 minutes or so, the entire world changed, and Rudy was right at the center of it. And he's on TV all the time now defending Donald Trump, and he ran for president. I was involved with that, and you can think whatever you like about what Rudy's done since, but it's very hard to look back on that time 17 years ago and not just really be grateful for what this man did for this city and this country in standing up so strong as he did. So it was the most exciting thing that could possibly happen in an author's life. I don't really, I've done pretty well for myself. That book was a #1 bestseller. I've written a bunch of others, so I've done pretty well writing words, including with both of you guys. And it's still this many years later. It's hard for me to put into words what it felt like to be the sort of official chronicler of Rudy Giuliani during that time when the entire world's eyes were on him.
And Ken, did you keep a moment-to-moment journal, that diary that day, or over the course of those couple of weeks after that, or did the mayor, or how did that all work?
I did, Liz. He wanted me by his side as much as possible for that very reason, because things were happening so fast that he wanted for posterity and also for his own, decision making, to have someone writing down, whether it was Helmut Kohl coming to see the site, or the sudden appearance of what looked to be packages of anthrax in Tony Carbonetti's office. It was an incredibly chaotic time. I don't know if you guys or your listeners would even remember, but just about a month and a half after 9/11, a giant plane on its way to the Dominican Republic crashed right after leaving JFK. It didn't just crash; it crashed like on the streets of Queens.
Yes,
I remember going there with the mayor and seeing this giant engine on the streets, and it certainly seemed like that was going to be terrorism. We'd had anthrax, we'd had September 11th, so that turned out not to be. There was some kind of tragic mechanical failure, but it just, if you remember those first couple months after the attacks, it just felt like this is war. It's on our soil. We're under constant attack.
Ken, you just said something that was jarring to me. And first of all, I think leadership will be, I think, the chronicle for the rest of time. I mean, that book is now a history book, and that's quite something. But when you said September 10th, it reminded me. I was running the Metropolitan Republican Club up on 83rd Street. We did a rally for Mike Bloomberg. I had forgotten about the night before, and we got out there, went to bed. We had the primaries the next day. And the whole world changed after that. It was never the same. But you also remind, I mean, in so many ways. I mean, it brought us to where we are through the Bush era, the Obama era. Like it literally changed everything, economically, sociologically. But going back to that Giuliani that we all remember so well, what I found extraordinary was the little things that he did that I don't know if the rest of the country knew about. Because, there was other news by that time, but he was out, and you were probably with him, Ken. He was out serving as like best man for widows, for 9/11 widows. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was he officiated those funerals. Like, can you talk to that a little bit? Those little things that a lot of the public didn't see.
Yeah, well, thank you for drawing attention to that, Phil, because I think it's important. Because I think that's the role of a public official is, when tragedy happens, you become kind of comforter in chief. And, Rudy was a strange guy to work for, because if things were going really well, then the tiniest little thing it can make him really crazy, really upset. But under the worst duress imaginable, there was nobody calmer and more steady at the wheel. So you described it well, and I picked out one particular day because I just want to show the totality of it. He attended some 300 plus funerals, and remember there was over 300 just firefighters who died. So you literally couldn't go to everyone's funeral because there were so many people killed. They were at the same time in different parts of the area. But he went to over 300 funerals, and I picked out one day. I think it was around Columbus Day, so maybe early October. I don't have the book in front of me, and it just detailed what it was like to go to the funeral after funeral where the grandparents were there. It's so upsetting and jarring. And by that point, I had been with him at a couple funerals when an officer had died or some in the line of duty, or I think there had been a firefighter who unfortunately got killed in a fire. So I understood it to be a sad thing that can happen, but the totality of it, when you're going to 10 or 11 of them in a day, you literally have to chopper across the city, and just at the same time, when everyone there is also shell-shocked, not from losing their loved one, but from this this fear that the city and the country were under siege. It really was an amazing time, and I think Rudy handled himself with such incredible dignity and strength. It just set an example for the world. And I'm not trying to make a political statement. I realize there are people on all kinds of partisan views. It's not my interest to try and persuade them, to support Rudy's politics or anyone else's, although obviously I did and do. But I think on that time, early October and September 2001, was about as close as this country could get to real unity when we really believed in what this guy was doing. And by the way, there were politicians on all sides who just stood up incredibly strong and behaved themselves. And I think about that a lot now in these incredibly divisive times when everybody just seems to, to hate each other.
And it seemed to last, and it lasted quite a while. It was not a fleeting, feel-good moment for the, for people, from all walks of life and all sides of the aisle and, across the country. I think for years that there was the tremendous strength and goodwill that came from all of that really from that leadership.
Yeah, I think that's right. It really shows you. The reason we changed the name of the book from, this cutesy sort of Rudy's Rules to just plain leadership is because it matters. And, Rudy would get asked constantly. We did, 3-4 years of speaking to her after this. So he could, meet audiences all over the country and all over the world. He'd get asked constantly, are leaders born or made? And he had a really nuanced answer. He would say, well, first they have to be born. But after that, they've got to really study the things that motivate people. We talk about things like optimism and how you just don't want to follow someone into battle if they're not confident. And one of the points he'd make that seems so elemental. In fact, I remember trying to talk him out of including it in his stump speech, but I'm really glad I couldn't talk him out of it. Is he used to talk about and he'd always end it with his final point. He'd say, if you want to be a leader, you've got to like people. And that seemed like axiomatic to me, like a tautology. But I understand now that there was a much deeper layer that he meant. He meant that you have to like people in a way that doesn't think that you're better than them. You just have to sort of like being around people, and the people who want to be led can feel that. And I think that's what people mean when they talk about, that sort of, the three of us have been in politics together. That constant question you get, how could George W. Bush have beaten Al Gore, or Bill Clinton, have beaten very popular then George H.W. Bush? And they ask that question, who would you rather have a beer with? And that's really what that's getting at. And it's a meaningful question because of that. It's you got to like people.
That's right. Ken, I got to say one thing. I don't think I got a chance to say it to you when you were editor at The Observer. Was I was such an admirer, and I'm not always the biggest fan of the president, but I try and call balls and strikes. But I noticed that as editor of The Observer, owned by Jared Kushner, you would run stuff that was sometimes critical. Like I thought I was almost breathtaken by how down the middle I thought the paper ran things. And to me, it was the way journalism is supposed to be. Yeah, it was so striking to me. I was amazed by it.
I always felt like the paper never got enough credit for that, and quite frankly, I felt like I still feel like Jared Kushner never got enough credit for that, because he could have fired me, he could have fired everybody there.
He should get huge credit.
I think it's
huge credit.
He really should, and we ran a story by Dana Schwartz, who was a staffer there, who wrote an absolutely brilliant and brutal take on what she believed was then candidate Trump's failure to address anti-Semitism among some of his supporters. We ran unbelievable commentary. We broke news. We broke the story. This is a classic Bill O'Reilly type story. We broke the story that one of I think Trump's New York State chairman had been either sent a mailer or been quoted, saying that Barack Obama was a Muslim, which is very unpopular, and it's a tough story, and we broke that story. So, we ran a lot of stuff, not just commentary, but breaking news. But what we didn't do is completely dismiss him. There were places like the Huffington Post that would only run stories in the entertainment section, or places that would run these silly disclaimers saying, we don't cover him seriously because he's a TV reality person. We made the assessment, partly because of my tenure in politics, that this was a serious candidate who had a really good chance of winning the primary and a decent chance of being competitive in the general, which turned out to be right. So we took the candidacy seriously from the beginning. We covered him tough, and it was a tough position because his son-in-law was helping to run the campaign. There's no doubt about it. That was a very tough position. I don't know that we got everything right, but we really did try hard to be fair.
Can I ask you? Sorry, Billy. Go ahead.
Go, Liz. Go ahead.
I just want to ask you, given your experience and your credentials as a journalist and a first-rate journalist, if you could share your thoughts on the anonymity of the New York Times op-ed, and just never mind the contents of it, but just whether the Times should have published it the way it was submitted, what the responsibility is of the paper. Do you give it any credence, given that it was anonymous and that the average viewer has no idea what level a senior administration official really is, and all of the above?
Well, from a journalism point of view, I think there's absolutely no problem with the Times running it. I would have run it as well, presuming that it is, as they said, the person's identity is known to them, and they said that, and I believe it. So, if it just came in through the transom as anonymous and the person said they were a senior official, then they shouldn't have run it. But they said they know who it is and that it is as described. I think journalistically there's absolutely no problem with running it. But I'm going to weigh in here and say that for the person who ran it, I think it's despicable behavior. I think, I'm just someone who thinks you sign your name to what you think, and if you're not okay with, nobody likes every decision their boss makes. That's what it means to have a job. But if you're so discontent with the direction that the leader is taking the enterprise, you leave the enterprise and fight from the outside. That's more true in a democracy than anywhere, because this doesn't reflect some guy who became president through a coup. People, he was elected fair and square through the rules of our system. And, you can talk about 3 million fewer popular votes or whatever asterisks you want to put. But
he won.
I don't think that
people,
won. Yeah, he won.
He won.
And what I don't think people are correctly assessing is that the people who hate Trump so much that they're cheering this, they're giving permission for the next 100 presidents to have similar treacherous behavior in their midst. And it's
I
very
came around
dangerous.
to your opinion pretty quickly. Yeah, no, that's right, Ken. You're setting precedent, and that's and if I was working, I've worked for a lot of candidates over the years. That would be, I don't mean by law, but it feels treasonous to do that. You just don't do that. If you can't take the candidate, you walk away, and you say why. I'd love to ask you. Is that right?
That's why I left politics, Billy. I had a candidate. I don't. There's no need to embarrass this person, but I had a candidate in 2010 who was so outrageous, and I really didn't think this person could win.
Right.
So you have sort of a duty, almost like any vendor or legal. You have a duty to work hard, and then in the Tea Party wave, this person won. And it's a prominent office that they won, and I just did not. It just didn't sit well with me. And then over the intervening next few years, my sort of bad feeling was proven right. And I just you don't always get to work for a Liz Feld, right? Sometimes you got to hold your nose a little bit, and that's really the reason I took the Observer job. Is I just couldn't stand the thought that I was helping to put people into real positions of power. It's not a game. It's not like
it's not a game.
You're helping the Yankees win instead of the Red Sox, where ultimately it doesn't matter. This is important stuff. And
Ken, and I know we won't keep you too long because I know it's the new year. But I'd love to talk to you, and Liz and I talked about it in advance, that we'd love to get your take on where politics is today, which is one of the reasons why I've tried to get out a couple of times. I keep ending up back in part because I need to make a living. But where do you see it compared to where it was, in 2000? I mean, it's a completely different game. I'd love to get your take.
It's totally unprecedented. Trump has completely shifted the rules. It is really not about left and right, which was the dynamic that all of us, came up in. It's now completely about insiders and outsiders. So, the insiders of both parties cannot stomach this guy, and they're strong and they have a lot of power. So, you've got the entirety of the media, the entirety of Washington, whoever wrote that editorial, Bob Woodward, that's the inside, and they hate him. And then outsiders, again, from both parties, like this guy. And it's a very strange dynamic. That's never happened during the lifetime of anyone on this call. So unfortunately, that dynamic has been accompanied by a nastiness that's just, and part of it's enabled by technology, and we've got Twitter and these other sort of really just dangerous people have the ability to, broadcast their opinions to millions instead of just to, the people on their corner bar. So our politics is in a really state right now, and it's very discouraging to me.
Do you feel, I agree with, I share everything you just said, Ken. And do you think, though, that something's starting to shift here, even with Trump's supporters? Billy and I were talking earlier about how he's sliding with independents even, and I don't know if it's the cumulative effect of the books that are being written, these nutty people like Omarosa with their tapes and her, again, people who exit the White House and feel compelled to go out and tell every single detail that went on every day. I don't know how much of it is even accurate. Certainly the way the president and the White House handled the McCain death and funeral I thought was unfortunate. I don't know why they did it that way, but just cumulatively, if you think we're starting to see some real effects on the president.
Yeah, I absolutely do think that. I think it's hurting him a lot. I think that the Democrats and others who oppose Trump tried for about a year and a half to make Russia the story, and that just didn't stick at all, because it's not a. First of all, it relies on a smoking gun, and absent a smoking gun, it doesn't it makes it feel like, wow, we just wasted 2,000 hours of TV time because there was some meeting with some low level staffers. So right. it didn't make any sense at all. But when you start to say, okay, forget about Russia, the real problem with this president is his administration's in total chaos. And then every day it's like, there's some new chaotic incident that happens. I think it does have a cumulative effect. And I don't think that that's necessarily the president's fault, but it's certainly his responsibility. And, if I were his advisor, I would advise him that this is a big deal. And you gotta, it's not enough to actually have put in place a lot of policies that are moving this country's goals forward, which I think he has. You have the job as communicator in chief to let people understand that you've done that. And when you're talking about Omarosa and you're talking about John McCain's funeral and you're talking about, countless other things, you're not communicating that, black unemployment is at the record low in history, and that the unemployment rate in general is lower than the GDP, which I never thought I'd say in my lifetime, and that we tore up the Iran agreement and we moved the embassy
to Jerusalem,
in Israel,
right.
to Jerusalem, and all of these other promises that were hard to do and were fulfilled and are, if not universally lauded, like I think the first couple of things I said, at least appreciated by the people who originally supported him. I think, if you're talking about Omarosa, you're not talking about the unemployment rate, and it's that simple.
That's right. I just saw Jason Miller make a similar observation on television earlier. But that's right. I mean, we talked about it. I mean, I sat in how many meetings with you, Ken, on campaigns talking about message discipline. And it's the economic side, he's got a great conversation to have. He should be pounding it every minute of every day. And it's hard. It's hard when, some people think very quickly and they get distracted easily. But it's, it could be death in a communications environment that chases every shiny object.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think the one thing that will help this president is the sudden reemergence of Barack Obama.
And John Kerry.
Me too.
And John Kerry.
I agree.
And Hillary Clinton. She's on the bridge with Governor Cuomo. I just think that Trump is a guy. He's a counterpuncher, and he's a guy who really needs. Okay, here's what I'm like, and here's what the other guy's like. He just needs that to articulate his message.
Do you think there should be any hard and fast rule or policy about ex-employees or former employees of the White House going out and writing books, whether there should be a 5-year waiting period or a 10-year waiting period or no ban at all? Or because I happen to think that every president or any president should be entitled to some sense of security and confidentiality. And that doesn't mean that things shouldn't be transparent, and I believe fully in open government. But this seems to me, and this really started with George Stephanopoulos writing a book right when he walked out of the Clinton White House. But it seems to me now that people almost go in with the full intent of writing a book within 2 years and getting out. It just baffles me.
No, you're bringing up some valid points, Liz, but I can't agree with you. I'm a First Amendment absolutist, and I'm not as a book author, I'm not about discouraging people from writing books. What I think is the much better solution than some kind of ban or asking them to sign these non-disclosures is, hiring people of character so they don't, get kicked out and 2 seconds later have an instant book with some secretly recorded stuff. I mean, why do you have people working for you in the White House who are secretly recording?
Well, no question. No question. Of course, that's the question. Yeah. There's no question about that.
Right. So, I think that this president became president because he hadn't been involved in politics for 40 years, like, this murderer's row of Republican candidates who he bested in the primary, and certainly like his opponent in the general. But one of the downsides of that is, you promise your constituents you're going to be a change candidate and do everything differently. So then when you become president, you hire people who are sort of, not the usual suspects, and that gets you some good change fast, and they're not scared to break things, but it also gets you some people who are, basically reality show contestants and tape you behind your back and then write a book.
Yeah. Yep. And Ken, before we lose you, what are you working on now? You're always doing. I know you were in the music industry at one point. You've been an author. You've been an editor. You've been a political ad maker. You've been a political advisor. What are you up to? I just love to hear. Before we lose you, what you're doing.
A polite way of saying I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Yeah.
No, you're always doing about 19 things.
He's got a couple of websites, 6 or 7.
Yeah, that's right. I started this suite of sites mostly under a brand called The Globe. So the New Jersey Globe, which is the leading political news site in New Jersey, the California Globe, which is new but growing, the Rock and Roll Globe, Book and Film Globe, and then there's one that's also about cryptocurrency called Modern Consensus. So that's what I'm working on, and we've probably got 2 more that are going to come online later this year, and then we got to take about a year to digest them, get them going like they should. But so far,
that's fantastic.
They're growing. They're growing fast and getting readers.
Ken, is there anyone on the political horizon who could drag you back into the mix? Do you see any young folks around the country at all, at any level, who you think?
Other than Liz,
it's really hard for me to picture Liz.
I said young folks.
I didn't hear the suggestion. It's hard for me to picture. I did. You might recall, because I got a lot of guff for it. I did a little bit of writing for the candidate when he was candidate over. He had the speech to AIPAC that I helped on, and I've done some stuff like that since. I'm no longer the owner of a newspaper, so it wasn't as controversial. But I've helped Jared on some things. But it's very tough for me to picture myself working full time for candidate at this point. Partly because of the grind. It wrecked my marriage. It wrecked my finances.
It wrecks a lot of marriages.
It's tough work.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep. But secondly, because I'm in a good place now. Thank God I'm married to a new person and trying to be a full-time dad and a full-time stepdad. So it's just for personal reasons. But it's like Godfather 3 when just when you think you're out, they pull you back in. So who knows?
It sounds like you've got your hands full.
Doing what you should be doing.
Yeah.
And having a good time.
I hope so.
Yes.
Well,
I got to come up to Mamaroneck and see you guys at sales sometime.
Yes,
it's a deal.
You. Yes,
that
you
sounds
do.
great. We promised we'd let you go. We know you're with your family and you're celebrating Rosh Hashanah. But Ken, thank you so much for being on there. You could talk for hours. I'd love to listen to everything. Hopefully you can come back on because we'd love to have you again.
Well, thank you for that offer. You're 2 of my favorite people in New York politics. I always love working with you both.
Well, and Ken, it's so fortuitous, or it's good karma that we have you on the night before September 11th. You were such a big part of that day. So we'll be thinking of you tomorrow.
And remembering.
Yeah.
Okay.
Be well.
Thanks,
Ken.
Thanks. Liz, I was just thinking about it. I was just thinking about the Giuliani of those days. He was also serving. He was. I remember he was serving as the father of the bride for a number of those weddings after 9/11, where the fathers were killed.
Yep.
I'd forgotten those moments. You just kind of shut them down at some point, but he really was extraordinary. And Ken was there along with him for every minute and capturing it all for leadership. Pretty amazing.
Excuse me. I remember seeing him at so many police officers' funerals with the little kids. So many of those officers who died were young. They're probably 30, early 30s, and they were a lot of these widows were either expecting babies or had 2-year-olds or infants, and the mayor was there for so many of those funerals too.
Yeah,
and he did it for a long time.
Isn't it just amazing how much the world is different between now and then? It's just crazy. It's just crazy. I mean, with we went all over the world with some pretty expensive wars, and then the economy tanked. The political turmoil followed the wars and the economy tanking. We started swinging, back and forth, left, right. Just a really incredible confluence of events to get us to where we are right now. Pretty interesting.
Well, it's also interesting to think that a lot of the kids who are, in high school now, obviously they don't remember 9/11, but they also don't even really know what their universe was like before this, age of terrorism. So it's anytime they see anything on the news, their first assumption is, oh, those terrorists, it was a terrorist attack. And even if it's someone getting mowed down in Times Square, the first thing people think of now, it's staggering. You and I never had that experience, 20 years.
We were hiding under the desks from the Russians,
Yes, we didn't even know why we were hiding. They just said it's an air raid drill. We thought we were hiding from our parents.
Right, we didn't know why we were hiding. I thought it was the Japanese coming back. I had watched too many Pappy Boyington movies,
So true. One of the things I wanted to talk to Ken about, but I had promised him that we wouldn't keep him too long, was what he thinks about Ben Sasse. And Billy, I don't know if you've been following him, but he was on TV all of this whole weekend, wall to wall, because he was kind of baited into talking about whether he would ever leave the Republican Party. And he said that he had thought about it quite a bit. And he meant leaving it for the Conservative Party. He didn't mean leaving it to become a Democrat. But he's been very vocal over the last couple of years. He wrote a terrific book. It's part biography, part his worldview of what sort of what it takes to raise solid citizens, and what the morality of this country and what we need for the future. So I don't know if you like him or if you've watched him, but I'd love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I really like Ben Sasse. I've noticed him in 2016 for the first time. He was kind of a newcomer. But I'd like him selfishly to join the Federalist Party of America, which I'm involved with. But he seems to be like a really straight shooter. He doesn't attack the president gratuitously, but I think his objections to the Republican Party go far beyond any objections he might have with the style of Donald Trump. He seems very disappointed that Republicans have lost all spending discipline. The debt issue has gone out the window. We have made a lot of promises, on foreign trade and tariffs, et cetera. And I think, there are a lot of Republicans like Ben Sasse, I happen to be one of them, that thought that these things were fundamental to who we are. And they just seem to get washed away by populism, which some people love. And there'll be some listeners that are huge fans of the administration. But the conservative tenets, the legs of the stool got swept away. The foreign alliances, the rest of it. And so I think Sasse is an honest voice out there in the wilderness. He's young. He was. Some people tried to recruit him to run in 2016. He said, "Listen, I've got young kids. I'm not ready to do it. I don't have enough experience in government or politics yet." But he's definitely someone to watch. I mean, there are others, and he's also, he's somebody that serves in the Senate that has been critical, where due of this administration, but has not walked away. He didn't retire like a lot of other people did. Like, he's hung in there. So I think he's a really interesting guy. And he tweets a lot. You could tell he's doing it himself. I mean, a lot of people, I tweet for a half dozen people that are in elective office. And you could tell the difference between, kind of a consultant driven, generic tweet and the real stuff. And he's tweeting his own stuff. He's communicating with individual Americans, in real time on any given day. I think he's an interesting guy. I keep an eye on him.
He's got a good sense of humor. He doesn't take himself too seriously. I think it's going to be great for him to have Mitt Romney in the Senate by his side. I saw Romney tweeted earlier today, basically he's outraged at the fact that, last year we spent $300 billion just on interest alone on the debt, which, as we talked about with Joe Carvin a few weeks ago, it was $21 trillion and climbing. And there certainly are not enough Republicans in Congress talking about that. In fact, there are so few you can practically name them on one hand. So for Ben Sasse to be able to get out, once we get through this midterm election, for him to get out front next year with Mitt Romney and maybe a couple of others, it will be. I think it should make a difference, and he needs some fresh blood beside him there, because he does. There's not enough of it.
He does, and that's the thing, is that you've got to be, in order to take on that gigantic load of debt, you have to be willing to throw your political career away. I mean, you have to do two things from my perspective. One, you have to communicate very succinctly with the American public in a very convincing way, in a way that has not been heretofore done. To explain why it's an absolute necessity to get the debt down, and to start restraining spending at the federal level. And the second thing you need to do is be willing to pay for it with your job, because you're going to have to go into the third rails. You're going to have to grab the third rails and extend the age limits on Social Security, on some Medicare things. It's radioactive. It polls 88 to 12 against you, but you still have to do it. And so I think you're right. I think a Sasse might have the guts to do it. I think a Romney might, but there's got to be a few of them. If it's just one, it's not enough, because everyone else is chicken and they'll run for the hills. But they need to have a sober conversation. I had hoped that it was going to be Paul Ryan doing it, and then I think history just moved in a different direction for Ryan. But that's what it's going to take. And Sasse is a young guy who might just have the intestinal fortitude to do that. We're gonna, we'll find out. I hope it's he.
Well, if we believe that the blue wave is going to take over in the House, then we're basically going to rely on the Senate, because you're not seeing this kind of leadership from the White House. I'll tell you that. I mean, I was counting on Trump to veto the spending bill, which he didn't, that omnibus bill. And then he said later on that he regretted it. But I don't think with him going into 2020 that he's going to take on any of these entitlements. There's just no chance. So it's going to have to come from the Senate.
Yeah, and it's funny, because to Trump's fairness, he promised not to. He told voters that he wouldn't do that, and that kind of fell into that populist strain where he said, "No, I'm not going to touch it." And he didn't want to go there, and at least he was honest about it. There's so many ostensible conservatives that go out there that talk about this stuff and then do nothing when they get into office. But this is going to blow up on us, and Joe talked about it so well. Joe Carvin talked about it so well a couple of weeks ago with us. But those interest rates are moving up, and as the economy begins to churn along, I mean, it's going to fly. And interest rates don't tend to go up a basis point at a time. They go up in chunks. 0.5%, 1%. Then suddenly you're at 3. Then you're at 5. Then you're at 7. And you could be looking, realistically or semi-realistically at $1 trillion in debt payments annually in just a few years. And that's just bananas. I mean, that's 6-7 times the budget of New York State in interest payments, annually. And that, it freezes out investment. I mean, it's a real problem. And we need young, fresh, brave communicators to explain it to the public, so that when the time comes to make these hard choices, there's some understanding of why we have to do it, or we just don't do it.
Well, when you look at how active this younger generation of voters is on issues, and not necessarily at the polls, but certainly between elections on issues of immigration, gun rights, and gun violence, we got to figure out a way to get them engaged on this issue of the debt and the financial security of this country. And for them, I don't know how, they certainly understand what student loans mean and what student debt means. So maybe that's something that we can focus on too as we go forward here, because it's, I think that could be a way for us to start making a difference, because our generation somehow has let all of this happen.
Yeah, it was something I was going to ask Ken, because he's done a lot of financial writing. I remember he was writing for the Wall Street Journal and a few other publications. He was always publishing, kind of business pieces. But I didn't want to keep him on because we had said, get back to your family. But it's a conversation that needs to be had, but it's not even close to being discussed. It was, as we said, with Simpson Bowles a few years ago, but it's not even in consideration. And you're right. If the Democrats take over the House, there goes that. But the Republicans, frankly, haven't been doing anything anyway. I mean, those are my people, but they just punted as soon as they got power.
No, and I don't know. I mean, I'm not out campaigning with anybody, and you are. And I wonder what any of these candidates are talking about when it comes to the federal budget. I know in New York, Molinaro was talking about the state budget, but do you think are members of Congress actually even addressing any of this stuff? Can they even get any traction? Is it just Trump 24/7 that voters aren't even listening to issues like?
That raises a whole other point, which is really important, I think, for anybody running for any office in America right now, whether it's dog catcher or mayor or
those might be one and the same. Sometimes they're the same.
It's all the same. You did all of those in one job. I remember.
Same job.
When you were mayor. But it is very, very difficult in this environment to get any traction in any races. In 2016, I did a couple of congressional races, and you just couldn't get press. I mean, you could get a story placed here or there, but you couldn't get any momentum in a race because everything went to Trump in Washington. And Trump is so good at generating news. Obviously, that's been his genius for 40 years. That once you begin to get a public conversation going, whether you're outside of Phoenix or outside of Minneapolis or in New York or Virginia, you could start to get a conversation going. But then the next day, it's a big national scandal issue. Not a scandal, but can you believe what he said about Nike or about the NFL or about Omarosa or about Morning Joe? And all the attention shifts constantly. So it's very hard to build a narrative. I mean, that's what I do for a living, and you've done, Liz, is build narratives for campaigns. The narrative is interrupted. It's like trying to read a book, and you have to put it down every 12 seconds to go look at something on television. And it's hard to follow the storyline if you're a voter. And so it makes it very difficult. It makes it difficult. So, campaigns have to figure out how to get around that. And maybe, as you talked to me earlier about, it brings back the old-fashioned things like knocking on doors. And, billboards and doors, those things work.
Well, incumbents has always had a huge advantage over challengers, but it seems to me that it's even more so in this climate. It's so hard to raise money when you're a first-time candidate or a challenger, and to try to do it when you can't even get an article in your own local paper about your race, or the first thing that you're asked is, well, where do you stand on Trump? It's a problem. And it's just not fair. It's not fair to good people who are running, and it's doing a terrible, terrible disservice to the public. And
it just kind of happens organically. I mean, it's like Ken talked about the world, the digital world, and the rest of it. And with the president, I'm not saying this to be critical, but he uses Twitter very effectively, though, sometimes not so effectively. He knows how to make noise. I mean, and there's a tactic in that in politics that Trump became very good at it, whereas, you stir it up and then you take advantage of it. You stir it up and you take advantage of it. You create chaos and then get something out of it, move on to the next thing. And he's used it as a business tool for years. The problem is that there's nothing left for anybody else to talk about. And you can't fix that because it's just happening in a real way. The news has to cover it because it's what people want to talk about. But, I talked about the Federalist Party before, which is kind of a localist party pushing issues down to the local level wherever possible. But it's hard to have those conversations when, again, you keep having to go look at Fox, CNN, and MSNBC to find out what's going on,
Don't you think we've reached the place of complete national exhaustion, though? On this or no? It's interesting. You and I, before we got on the air, we were talking about John McCain's funeral, which was only 8 days ago, and it seems like a century ago. But for a moment, it seemed like the country paused and reflected on both his life and his legacy, but also, what he's meant to the country over the years. And at many times when he brought out the best in people, both in politics and just, in their communities. And that feel-good feeling, and also I think a little bit of a sense of shame. A lot of people looked around and thought, God, we've got to get back to this. We've lost it here with all this hysteria and the fighting and the name-calling. And by Tuesday morning, it was all over. It was like it never happened. It's like people never even And that's actually scares me, and it's sad.
But I think that was probably the longest news cycle that we've had for a long time. When you think about the shooting in Las Vegas. I mean, and I say that one because that one was just. I mean, they're all insane. They're all crazy shootings. But you had a guy that set up with he created an automatic weapon and opened up on a concert shooting out of a casino in Las Vegas and shot how many people. And I remember when that broke, I knew, and we all knew, it was going to be at best a 2-day story, at best. I mean, like 9/11 was like a 6-year story. I mean, we were both in New York that day, and we had some, involvement with people that were there and didn't make it. And after about 3 years, I was so sick of talking about 9/11. I couldn't bear it. I mean, after about 3 weeks, I was tired of it, but it went on and on and on. And now you have a mass shooting, and it's 24 hours sometimes. It just or lots of these news stories, you just know they're going to move along because something else is going to push it.
Well, speaking of big news stories, we've got a massive hurricane hitting the coast, and I hope for all of our listeners who are down in the Carolinas, you're going to be safe and evacuate or do what you need to do, because it's right. We're staring right at it.
That's right. And also a happy New Year to any Jewish brethren listening, and yes, stay out of the storm.
And thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you next week. See you.
Yes, he did.